So I'm getting a little concerned about this. Every morning when I come in, Greg and I sort of run through what's come in, what's gone out, the status of each project. This is looking good. This year, it's like the floodgates opened. I mean, the shop filled up with cars.
We average 30, 40 projects on the go at any one time, and we're at 58.
The enthusiasm for vintage cars is still as strong as ever. This is newish. The cars are different. It's not 20s and 30s anymore. It's 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it's because the people who loved those when they were kids can now afford to buy them.
They all can't be in the same department at the same time, so we just use a rotation to get them through.
God, sometimes I wish I had a bigger building, because it gets pretty crowded in here. Outside, we've got what I call the ladies in waiting. Those are cars that we just don't have room to bring in.
GTX, we're setting it home.
Quite often, there'll be 4 new cars out there I've never seen before. And this is almost ready to go back down to Brooklyn.
Well, if you remember this one when it came in, I don't, because I wasn't here.
Yeah, and you've got 8 more coming in?
Yeah,
right
it's going to be a busy year here.
Yeah, we're a little packed up, eh?
Oh, my God. So many cars.
So today I'm working on a customer's 1971 Nova. It came to us as a complete car, but he's having a lot of drivability problems. It's got a 500+ horse 427 small block in it, so it should blaze the tires off the back. I could get in it and put my foot on it and it wouldn't even turn the wheels. Off! Nothing happening. It had a really cheap fuel injection system on it. I took that off and put a new carburetor on it and had to change the distributor as well. And the car sounds like it's gonna run like a scared rabbit now. Take it out, go for a test drive, just put it in drive, go down the road. I don't like this. This isn't working well at all. Before I even got to our other driveway, I'm in 3rd gear. It's like the shifts are stacked. They're close and fast, boom, boom, boom. Shouldn't be like that. Automatic, right? Should shift as you're progressively gaining speed. If you drive it too much with the shifts stacked, it can really hurt the transmission, and it doesn't take much. So I go to pull back in the shop, and it's like boom, boom. It's like lumbering. So why is it doing that? I bring it back in, check it out. So there's a cable that runs inside the transmission. It's called a TV cable. All right. So this cable here is your throttle cable. So when you put your foot to the floor, it pulls that back, right? And then below it is the TV cable, and that's the one we want to adjust. When you press your throttle, it starts to open up. Well, it pulls a TV cable as well, and it controls several different things inside the transmission. See, now that's not tight. The proper way to adjust it, you're supposed to push that, it releases it. I push that back in there. It's hard to push that. You need 3 hands. And now, when I go wide open throttle, that's pretty good. It's nice and tight. To me, that's adjusted correctly. So, we can go for a test drive and see.
The Ferrari 250 GT California Spider has been in the metal shop for an awful long time, but it's really close to body and paint, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. This Ferrari is another one of our special projects. We've built this car mostly from scratch and basically just using photographs of other cars as our main reference. In the late 1950s, this was the Ferrari. An original 250 GT California Spider is now worth in excess of $20 million. The owner of this project has commissioned it to be used as a daily driver down in Florida. So we're just doing all the final sort of adjustments, making sure all the seams and gaps are fine. You know, the most time-consuming phase of a car like this is literally making the body. You know, in this day and age, we're used to everything being handed to us. I mean, body men don't make bodies anymore. They just slap new parts on. So it is pretty daunting when you go, okay, we're going to make a car. And what are we starting with? Flat sheets of aluminum.
Oh, this is a problem.
Doors were a challenge. I mean, we started making the doors 2 years ago.
That thing's fighting you a little bit, eh?
I'd rather not talk about it.
When we first got it finished, the car was going to be too hard to get in and out of, so we had to make the doors a little wider.
Fight that door. Keep on fighting. You'll win.
Okay, get the torch.
Okay.
They needed to be adjusted a few times. They'll need some fine-tuning.
Hammer that out a little. Look at that, it actually closed.
Nice, eh?
We're onto something.
And that's the stage we're at now. It's very small jobs, but they're all very, very important.
A lot of it we do have to make. The real car, they only made 50 or 100. So we get to make a lot of these little pieces. You can't just buy them. It's quite a feat. I mean, it sounds simple, but there's a lot of really small adjustments to be made. We've made the latches and all the mechanisms to have the hood open and close. I was able to find pretty good pictures of what the hood latch looked like online. It's easy to make a paper template, because then you're not wasting any material. Then you can transfer that onto a piece of aluminum in this case. On the bandsaw, you can cut the piece out, get a rough shape, and refine the shape down on a belt sander. And if it works, then you bring it up to a full polish, which would be the final finished product. With any fine tuning, they should be perfect. Oh, that's a beautiful thing. Like, we're right on the money, as long as we get rid of that little squeaky sound. I heard a little squeak in the hood, just the mechanism where it unlatches.
Oh, yeah.
Gonna try to lube this hinge up just a bit. Give that handle a couple pulls there. Nice and lubed up. No more squeak. A little bit of lube, no problem.
Hey.
Look at that, eh? The car's gotta be perfect when it leaves the metal shop. Just love the feeling of that latch. It's so positive.
Nah, it's still the same here. It's just lumbering.
It's been quite the learning curve welding sheet metal aluminum. You gotta be quick, or it'll melt Dougie's fingers.
So, transmission TV cable adjustment take 2. We'll see if it's making any difference here now. Nah, it's still the same here. It's just upshifting so fast and stacking the shifts. It's just like lumbering. Because it wants to go more. It's not going enough. And just getting to that shift point too fast. It's a really nice car. Somebody did a nice job on the paint and the interior and stuff. It's just the mechanical isn't quite up to snuff. I'm gonna have to maybe try another governor. It's the only thing I can think that's gonna make it shift less fast.
We're getting really finicky on the Ferrari. We're getting into the nitty-gritty details. Now's the time to make everything perfect. So we've got a gap on the bumper with the fitment on the quarter panel here. We've got a pretty big gap at the front, and there's almost no gap at the back. Bumper's made in another country. It's made in Italy. The car body is made here in-house. They don't line up 100%, and the bumper's actually bolted through the body of the car here, so we don't want a weak spot. So I'm gonna make a decorative spacer. It'll look like a little piece of jewelry around that end of the bumper there. I'll use this piece of aluminum to make the wedge. First, I map out my angle. This is my favorite saw. This one's a Brobo made in Australia. It makes nearly perfect cuts at an incredibly fast speed. Water cooled, there's no other saw that'll cut through a solid chunk of aluminum like this. You'd be here all day on a bandsaw trying to cut that. This would be cooking hot if you used the chop saw. Nothing else, you could just grab the piece and touch it. So this could be our wedge. We'll see how it fits. Just a bang on the right angle. So now I'm gonna trace it out and I'll cut the shape of the bumper on there. And I'll just true it up on the belt sander, get her right down to my lines I drew. All right, because it's filling up a tiny gap that doesn't need to be there. It has to be perfect. That is a perfect fit. Beauty. Moving on. So now I cut a trim piece that I'm gonna weld on. I think this piece will do. Chunk of aluminum. So I'm gonna make it twice as big as I want to start, but there's a method to my madness there. That's gonna help suck a lot of the heat out when I weld it. Otherwise, this piece would probably warp and go all crazy. And there you are. Nice straight 1-inch piece.
Better be quick.
Yeah, you gotta be quick, or I'll melt Dougie's fingers. Aluminum's a real interesting metal to weld. You really have to pour the heat to it, and then as soon as it liquefies, you gotta pull the heat right back. It's easy to melt a piece welding sheet metal, aluminum. Now, I am not the best welder in the world, but I am a great grinder.
There's a lot to be said for talent. You know, sometimes, and I've run across this several times in the last 30 years, a guy walks in and he just hits the ground running. I mean, honestly, talent is better than guys I've known who've been working at this for 15, 20 years. He forms the whole thing in his head before he makes it, and then when he makes it, it's like second nature.
All right, I'm happy with that. Got the gap all filled up, it fits the bumper nice. Once the car goes for paint, we can polish it up to 100% there. So I just gotta make one for the other side.
So we've had some shifting problems with the transmission in this 71 Nova.
When the car came in, there was a governor in a bag on the floor. So the governor goes into the side of the transmission. It's got little springs and weights in there. And when it starts to spin, these outer weights will move. So when they move, it lets fluid go through passages in the valve body and tells the transmission to shift gears.
The customer had another one put in, and it was just shifting 1, 2, 3, 4. There was just no performance whatsoever. So we ordered another governor just to get that shift point right.
Slide it back up in here. There's 30 different ones, depending on your gear ratio, your tire size. So a lot goes into it. It's not just, yeah, that one will work. I'll get the cover for it. It's a governor. I think this car was built by a body man because the body looks great. They did a great job, but a lot of the mechanical end isn't up to snuff for a real mechanic.
This Nova, I don't know what its origins are, but I'll tell you, it didn't come off the GM assembly line like this. This is honestly a fire-breathing monster. Chevy Novas were created basically as a compact car. They were marketed as a second car. When you look at the advertising today, what was advertised was mom taking the kids to school or picking up groceries.
Fun to see, fun to drive, fun to buy.
It symbolized another level of success with a family. You could have a big Buick in your driveway and have a Nova sitting beside it. But then horsepower wars started, and they started shoving huge engines in all these little econo boxes and created muscle cars.
We've rectified a lot of other little problems, and this is like the last thing on our list here. It runs good now, let's make it shift, and then he can be driving it. And it's in there flush, so it shouldn't leak. That's perfect. So we'll take it out for a spin and see if our shifting problem's been rectified.
The wiper arm's loose, but I can't actually get to it.
This one here doesn't have no lights on the dash. It's got a rod under the dash, though.
Like the wiper arms are clipped onto the pivot.
There should be a bushing or something so it didn't have that play in it, or?
I don't know. It's hard to see up in there, too.
I know.
Well, every other year, the customer brings this Ford Fairlane in for something. Gives a call and say, hey, can I bring it in and, rotate the tires, do an oil change. We did some door seals on it. We repaired his seat for him, put all new carpet in it. The gentleman loves his car and wants it to be problem-free. And he was just worried about these pivots being loose because he had play in the wiper arms. Ron's gonna see if he can fix that up.
Not finding anything wrong with these wipers. And apparently after it's run for a while, he uses them, they come off. But I can't make it come off. I can't even pull it off. If I think it was loose, it's gonna fall off. I should be able to pull it off with my hands, but.
The older guys understand that this is what you have to do with these older cars. I mean, when this thing was new, you'd have a spring tune-up, a fall tune-up, you'd have it in for service. Now today, it's like, oh, the light doesn't come on the dash, we just keep driving. So this one here doesn't have no lights on the dash. It's got a rod under the dash, though.
The Fairlane was a really status car. There's a lot that can be said about 50s cars. But there's one thing they all share in common, and that is the fact that they are all sort of 1 or 2 year one-offs. The sales and marketing in the 1950s basically drove people to buying a new car every 2 years. That was what they really wanted. You know, when a car came out, it was similar for 2 years. There's embellishments and changes in trim and everything, and then, boom, completely new car. So when you bought a car in the 50s, the whole neighborhood turned out to see somebody's new car. But 2 years later, It's completely different from all the new cars. And I mean, there was one-year cars, like the 58 Chevrolet. It's a one-year body. So if you've got the money, that's pressuring you into buying a new car. That's something that modern manufacturers just wouldn't be able to get past their accounting systems. America was in a great position after the Second World War. They had this huge industrial capacity, this sort of golden era of the United States where everybody had money, the companies had lots of customers, and there was nobody that they were competing with. One of the devices that General Motors and Ford especially used was your car as a symbol of achievement. You know, when you first went out and got a car, you might have gotten a bottom-of-the-line Chevy 210 or something. But as you moved up, you could move up in rank in Chevys so that you could get Bel Airs and you could get Chevy Impalas. That was the ultimate Chev. But once you got there, well, where do you go? Pontiac. Some of the same attributes as Chevy, but a step above. From where do you go now? Oldsmobile.
There's no mobility like Oldsmobility.
And from Oldsmobile, you work your way into Buick.
Here is the first automobile literally born of aviation principles.
And from Buick, you jump into Cadillac. And I mean, once you've worked your way through the top of the Cadillacs, the Eldorado and cars like that, everybody knows you've completely arrived. In that day and age, they were like 3 years' salary for the average guy. Wow, it's a car. And I noticed you got the key in the ignition. Isn't that a hopeful sign?
This is more fun than one person should have. She had wings, she'd fly.
So I cruised through the metal shop earlier on today to take a look at the Ferrari because it's getting to a stage where it's basically turning into a car. It looks great, but this is the moment when all of that work that's gone before can be compromised by just the smallest little things. When you paint it, it's too late. So it's at this point that I start to get very, very fussy, and that's with door gaps and seams and the way the whole car is going to come together. So I walked in here a little earlier, Talon, and I mean, it's looking great. I mean, one of the easy things is, you know, looking at the front of the car and just side to side and basically drawing lines from the center of the car in all directions with my eyes. I can see that, you know, a lot of things are going to be done in the body shop. That doesn't concern me. I'm concerned about the windshield here. There's a couple of things with the windshield. I talked to Doug, and he said we don't have the bottom trim piece. You know, we'll do a worldwide search starting tomorrow, but chances are we're not going to find one. So we're going to have to make it. And that, again, details. You can make it and it can be beautiful, and you put it on and it's not quite the same color as the other pieces of the windshield surround. Now, if we make it out of stainless, we'll have to do a polish and see if it matches the color of the chrome. If it doesn't, we'll have to make it out of steel and get it chrome. And the same chrome shop that did the other work, so that we get the same color in the chrome as well. You got a gap right in here, so I don't think the trim's gonna fill. It's perfect over there. The body is just a little bit too high on the right-hand side, so the windshield frame is just a little bit high, so we've got to get that down so that the whole assembly sits down exactly evenly.
I've been daydreaming about that. I might make a little pocket in the body itself. I also saw one with welting there. That's almost like cheating.
They would have used welting to make up, like, when this car was originally made, it would have had all this stuff going on, and they would just fill it. I don't allow the kind of filling done on these cars as was done originally. It's a different day and age. We have different technologies. We certainly have the ability to do it right, so let's do it right. In the 1950s, Ferrari went from being sort of a modest little house of designs that were making basically cars for the track to a car that was represented by Hollywood. They were not mass producing. They were making very limited amounts of cars for a very extreme clientele. And they became emblematic of a level of achievement well beyond the normal person. Now, what about this? You got the same overlay on each side? If something isn't perfect, it doesn't need to be perfect in one place, but you've got to match that imperfection on the other side of the car. They have to be imperfectly the same.
Symmetry is key.
Yeah, well, that's it. This is all looking really good. I like the way that that's come in. I'm very pleased about the rear of the car. There have been some issues back there. If you look across here, I think that, is it the trunk that's doing this? Because this looks pretty damn straight. I mean, it's out 70/2 of an inch, but you can't let that stuff go. Didn't used to be as critical as now, but companies like Audi in the 80s started using laser measuring, and everybody's used to absolute perfect gaps now. So when we build something, we actually have to make it a lot better than they would have made it originally because people were far more forgiving over hand-built. So we have to do the catching up.
Yeah, massage it in,
Yeah, just massage
around.
it in and then do a little filing, and you should probably get it straight as a die. With hand-built cars, there's always things you can find if you've got a trained eye, but the fewer of those, the better. And you sure as hell don't want anything that the untrained eye can see. Yeah, well, it's a car.
It's starting to look like a car.
And I noticed you got the key in the ignition. Isn't that a hopeful sign?
So Brad's done 2 test drives in this 71 Nova, and I know he's got it dialed in. I've just been waiting to get my turn to get out in this car. You hit the throttle and it's just, whoa.
Got a little jam.
Pulls hard, it shifts crisp, it is doing everything that it should.
I think Bradley's got that motor set up. Man, oh man, this guy is gonna love, love, love this car.
I would say that a huge percentage of our clients are not collectors as much as people recapturing a moment in their lives. That moment when you were in the back of somebody's big Chevy and you were going off on an adventure.
This is more fun than one person should possibly have.
When we get older, we recapture those adventures with these cars.
She had wings, she'd fly.
It's a sublime experience.